Hey guys, Waterfowler41 here. I know I said I'd be doing a bunch of fundamental projects in the beginning, kind of the less sexy projects, but today we are going to do a little bit of a fun project, and the reason being is because I ordered the Corsa air intake and I'm sick of looking at it in the box. I want to see it on the truck, so we're going to go ahead and install it. So let's get everything out of the box here and we'll take a look at what I ordered, and then we'll jump right into the installation process here on my 2023 Raptor. Look at what comes in the kit, and real quick, this is part number 491356. There are three different types of air intakes that Corsa sells for the 2021 and newer Raptors, and really the only difference in the kit is what the filter is. So there's three different medias essentially. There's an oiled filter, there's a non-oiled filter, and those are more your conventional fiber filters that you could wash. And then their top of the line is the powercore filter. So this is a dry filter, and the filter itself is actually made by a company called Donaldson Filters. And if you're an industrial engineer or an engineer like myself, that name should ring a bell because they are the bee's knees as far as filtration. So I had a very similar kit to this on my Rebel. Had the same powercore air filter, loved it, liked the performance I got out of it even before I tuned the truck, and we will be tuning this in the future. So I figured let's go ahead and go with the same exact kit for the Raptor and give it a little bit more zip here. But anyway, what comes in the kit? So this kit is going to be replacing the Y pipe on the air intake. Comes with a couple couplers, obviously, to attach this to the factory up pipes there, and then your hose clamps. You got a little bit of hardware here, your filter, which ultimately lands inside of this filter airbox. So this is a closed air filter system, not an open one, so it's not going to be as loud as some of those open element ones, but at the same time, because it's closed, it's not going to be exposed to a lot of those dusty elements, and I don't want that, so that's why I like the Corsa kit here. And then you get a red, white, and blue little vinyl panel here, and what this is for is basically, if you can't see it right now, but on the back of this plexiglass cover, there is an opening, or there's kind of an etched in Corsa emblem, and if you put this blue sticker behind it, or the red or white, it'll allow it to shine through and look pretty cool. It's a very simple installation, so let's go ahead and get the camera set up, and we will dive right into the installation. All right, so as far as the first few steps of uninstalling the factory air intake, we're gonna go ahead on the back of the intake pipe itself, and we're gonna unplug the temperature sensor. Then we're gonna use a 7mm socket. We're gonna undo all of these hose clamps. So there's one here, there's one close to the engine, and then one down here. This one's a little bit tricky to get to, but ultimately once you undo that, then this Y pipe is ready to go. And then what we'll do is we'll focus here on the intake. There's a bunch of plastic clip or metal clips. All we're gonna do is just pop those guys off. And then once these pipe clamps are undone, this whole assembly should pop straight out. All right, so now that I got the pipes loosened, I went ahead and took off the one closer to the engine. There is armor all on everything. The top clips are done off the air intake here, and then everything should just pop out carefully. So just kind of wiggle everything out of there. That bottom pipe, it's a little bit of a bear to get off. There we go. So there was a pipe on the back side of this little Y pipe, and it was connected onto the hose. So once you undo that, then everything should come right out. So we can go ahead and take this and throw this in the box. We don't need this anymore. All right, while we're at it, let's go ahead and pull out the factory air filter. It's not too bad considering the truck only has 4,000 miles, but we don't need that anymore. All right, so now that we have that Y pipe out of here, as well as the top of the air filter boxes and the air filter, we need to focus on a couple of trim little tabs and pins that we need to remove. So there's two on here, and in order to remove these, we'll just get our metal trim tab removal tool, whatever, and we're gonna pop these guys off of the box. And then the other thing we need to do is come up here to the front of the little air duct, and we need to take out these two, just these two pins. There is one last thing that we need to undo, and that's this 13mm bolt right here. So let's go ahead and zip that guy out of here, and then the whole airbox should be able to pull straight out. That is an excessively long bolt for what it was doing. Anyway, so now everything should just pop straight out. It's just pins holding it in there, and that's it. So this is all that's holding it in, is just these rubber grommets. All right, so now that we got everything out of the truck and on our workbench here, there's a couple things you need to remove from the factory kit that need to be transplanted onto the Corsa kit. So the first thing is obviously this big air duct. There's an 8mm bolt right here, and that's all that's holding this guy on here. And that's gonna relocate right onto here using some of the hardware that came in the Corsa kit. All right, so when you have air intakes with a temperature sensor or mass airflow sensor on the pipe itself, one of the things you wanna do is be mindful of the orientation of the sensor in relation to the airflow in the tube. So if you see here, the bottom of the clip's here, and we basically have these lined up with the Corsa intake. So we're going to make sure that when we are reinstalling this guy on the Corsa intake, it's the same exact orientation. The next thing I want to show you is there's a little tab here. What we're going to do is get a little tiny flathead screwdriver, pop that up, and then this whole sensor should twist to the left and pull out carefully. One last thing about the sensor, sorry, I'm kind of beating this horse to death here, but we're going to have to remove that blue O-ring on here in order to make sure that it fits nicely inside the Corsa air intake. It doesn't need that additional O-ring. It's going to be way too tight to fit in there. So once we remove that, then this guy's going to pop in. And remember, the orientation is that thumb tab on the bottom, and then the little tab for locking is going to point towards the top end of the air intake. All right, so now we can start preparing our Corsa air intake box, and the first thing we're going to do is install this little wire harness bracket here. So there's 2 holes here. This bracket is going to drop in right there, and then there's some hardware in the kit that we're going to go ahead and use to attach it to the box. All right, moving right along, we got our bracket installed. Next thing we need to do is, again, go back to our factory air intake box. We need to remove this little fender gasket here. So this is the side that was attached to the fender. We're going to remove this guy from here, and we're going to reinstall it on the Corsa intake right inside here. It's going to be a tight fit. All right, just a quick note on that rubber gasket. The easiest way to install it is to take the metal inner piece out and then just install the rubber on the Corsa box, and then you're going to take the metal piece and you're going to insert it through the inside of the Corsa air intake box into the rubber gasket. You want the large metal lip on the inside, so you can see it right there. All right, now what we're going to do is go ahead and install the factory duct onto the Corsa air intake box. So we're going to get our hardware ready. We have a little bit longer bolt. It's the only long bolt in the kit. Make sure you have the spacer. So basically the way this is going to go is going to be a washer, bolt, and then you're going to have a spacer. Then it's going to thread through this little hole here, and then you're going to attach your lock nut or your lock washer and your nut on the inside. So let's go. All right, so we're looking at the bottom of the Corsa air intake box, and I just want to point out the 2 pegs here. So there are 2 pegs, and when we get into the engine bay, let's hop up on my ladder here. There are 2 rubber grommets. So that's kind of where you're aiming. Those 2 pegs need to go in here. And then if you remember, the front of the duct needs to attach to these 2 locations. All right, before you drop the air intake box into the truck, you're going to go ahead and remove this factory wire harness from the fender. So it's very easy. Just take a flathead screwdriver, stick it into this plastic clip here, and it'll release things, and then it'll pull it out. So that angle bracket that we installed on the Corsa box is where that factory wire harness is going to reattach. All right, so we have the air intake box reinstalled. That wire harness that was removed from the fender, it's now popped into that new bracket that's hanging out of the back of the Corsa box. Be mindful when you are installing everything. To keep an eye out for your air sensor wiring here. Again, you want to make sure that's nice and free and clear, because that's got to go and reconnect to the back of the air intake box, or I'm sorry, the back of the air intake tube. So go ahead and reinstall your 13mm bolt here into the fender. Then put your 2 push pins in here, and then everything is nice and solid as far as the box is concerned. So the last thing we're going to need to do outside of the truck is take this air filter adapter and pop that right into our new filter. Again, this is the same one on all 3 kits. The only thing that's different is the actual air filter itself. And then we'll take those 3 bolts and we'll install the air filter into the box, threading those screws through these 3 holes into the filter on the back side. All right, so our filter is installed on the filter bracket with that hose clamp, and then that filter bracket then pops through the outside of the air filter box, and that's where that hardware comes in to attach. So there's 3 bolts holding it here. Now, in full transparency, this took about 30 minutes longer than it should have because I lost a 10mm socket, and I was looking all over my garage, and turns out it was actually in my pocket. So what a pain in the ass that was. But anyway, we got our filter reinstalled, or we got our filter installed in the Corsa box. Now the last thing we could do is prep this tube and then start getting all our hose clamps in order to reinstall. So let's get the air temperature sensor fully seated here. So that little tab needs to be touching the rubber grommet. So carefully slide it into here, and again, make sure that the orientation is the correct way. All right, so the pipe is ready to go to install in the kit. We got our air temperature sensor all the way down until the tab touches the rubber grommet. Then as far as the orientation and which pipe and which hose clamp and sleeve goes where, the hump sleeve, as they call it, goes on the longer portion of the pipe. The straight sleeve goes on the bottom, the fatter portion here, and then the reducer goes on the back end of the pipe. So now all we need to do is just slide that pipe into place and line it up with each of these pipes. It's going to take some messing around, but it should be pretty simple. And then we're going to use an 8mm socket to tighten up all the hose clamps. All right, we have our pipe fully installed here. Got all the hose clamps in, situated where I want them. Now the last thing we need to do before we fire up the truck is obviously reinstall the temperature sensor, so I got to plug that in on the back of the pipe. But here is the window for the air intake box. So these stickers are so you can make this portion of the Corsa any color you want, other than, well, red, white, and blue. So you get blue, you get red, and then in between there you get white. For now, I'll leave it off. I do like the way it looks, and the window does give you a nice view of the powercore air intake. All right, before you fire up your truck, just give everything a second glance just to make sure everything is fully installed. Just go ahead and wiggle the pipe and all that. Make sure all your hardware is tightened. Make sure all the pipe clamps are tightened down. And last but not least, make sure that the temperature sensor on the back of the air intake is installed as well. If you fire up your truck without that plugged in, you are almost positively gonna throw a check engine light and have some headaches. So first, here's a before, and then right after that, we'll hear the after of the Corsa intake. All right, well, that's the installation of the Corsa air intake on my 2023 Raptor. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. Hope that helps you make your decision on whether or not this kit is for you. Like I said, further down the road, I will be doing a tune, and that's where intakes and parts like this, you know, catbacks, intakes, and what have you, that's where they really come to life. So right now, this will give us a little bit of boost in terms of performance, give us some sound, a little bit more pep on the throttle. But once we get this tuned down the road, then this thing will really come to life. But anyway, that's my Corsa air intake installation video. Hope you all enjoyed it. Appreciate it. Take care. Bye.